This episode, I start by quoting Amilcar Cabral, who says, "You measure the potential of a people for liberation based on how different their culture is from the oppressor." Cabral was a revolutionary leader during the struggle for independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. One of the components of a people's culture is its language. The language of the people influences their thinking, their attitude, and their perception of the world around them. It is therefore an important part of their life. When the British, as an imperial power, were withdrawing from Africa, one of the things that they ensured they should do, and they did very well, was to secure the English language in the African independent states. They did this by providing an article in each constitution to the effect that English shall be the official language in the independent colony. This has been the position to date. The protection of English as the official language in many African countries, if not all of them, has continued to live with us to date. For Zambia, from the Chona Commission of 1972 to 1973, Zambia has had 4 other constitutional review commissions. In all these commissions, the objective has been for the Zambian people to grant themselves a constitution that will stand the test of time, so to say. What is, however, interesting is that in all this period, and from all the submissions from the people of Zambia, this is across the different walks of life, at no time did the Zambians say to the commission or to one of these commissions that English must be removed from the constitution as the official language. This is despite the fact that only 2% of Zambians speak and understand English. We therefore have a constitution which discriminates against 98% of the population of this country. And for some reason, even those that are discriminated against, the ordinary people, the poor people of our country, see nothing wrong with that. If anything, they blame themselves for the fate of not speaking English, and they accept that as a handicap which they can't resolve. For the ruling party, it saves the post-colonial African governments. If you are going to govern a people using a language which they don't understand, using a language which they can't write, using a language which they can't speak, using documents that are expressed in a language which is not common to them, it is very difficult to have the ruling party held accountable by 98% of this population. So the ruling party and its government uses language to mentally manipulate the governed. And therefore, no government has any reason to change the status quo. I want to explore and speak to a few countries on this language question. Let's start with Cameroon. Cameroon is a former French colony. It gained independence from France in 1960. Cameroon has 2 official languages, English and French. The French-speaking Cameroon of Black Africa is 70% of the total population. The English-speaking part is 30% of the total population. Since 2017, Cameroon has had a conflict which is referred to as the Anglophone crisis. And this crisis is between the French-speaking Cameroonians and the English-speaking Cameroonians. Two groups of indigenous citizens of Cameroon, Africans, seeking to establish their identity through two foreign languages, English and French. Not any local language. The English-speaking Cameroonians have accused the French-speaking Cameroonians of discrimination, that they are being discriminated against on the basis of opportunities in the civil service, because the French-speaking Cameroonians dominate the civil service. And that conflict has been going on to date, with no solution in sight. The other country which may be of interest in this respect, by way of comparison, is India. When India formulated its constitution in 1949, the Indians decided that they were going to have two official languages: the local Hindi language, which is spoken by the majority of the people in India, and also English, which is mainly used for commerce. But the Indians went further than that. In rejecting anything that had to do with the British and cultivating and shaping their own identity, the Indians decided they were going to do away with the British dress code. They decided they would do away with the language, except for commerce, where they have to make the money by interacting with the world at large. The Indians also rejected the English cuisine. We have all over the world today what is referred to as Indian restaurants. That was the rejection of the English cuisine by the Indian people. The other country which has done very well in this respect after India would be South Africa. In June of 1976, there was an uprising in South Africa which is historically referred to as the Soweto uprising. These were protests by school children against the imposition of a new policy by the apartheid regime that the Afrikaans language was going to be a compulsory medium of instructions in schools. The people of South Africa, the black South Africans, rejected that. They saw it as an imposition of a foreign culture to compromise their language. In the Soweto uprising, about 700 school children were killed by security forces, all for one thing, one objective: to protect their indigenous local languages. The lesson South Africa drew from the Soweto protests was that when they were couching their constitution in 1993, just before independence in 1994, they provided for 12 official languages in the constitution. English being one of them, Afrikaans being one of them, and other Bantu languages. And the 12th one is what is referred to as the South African Sign Language. So there is something to learn. It's something that Zambia and other African countries can learn from South Africa in terms of how to truly proclaim and declare ourselves as independent. When Kenya got its independence in December of 1963, Ngugi wa Thiong'o was a lecturer at the University of Nairobi. Ngugi and a group of his colleagues decided to write a paper recommending to the University of Nairobi Senate that Kenya needed to decolonize its educational system if it is to achieve social and economic development. The Senate rejected those recommendations. However, many years later, Ngugi wa Thiong'o decided to confront not only his position on decolonizing the educational system in Kenya, but also in terms of the use of the English language as a medium of instruction. Guji went on to write a book entitled Decolonizing the Mind, The Politics of Language in African Literature. Guji warns us in that book that language is politics, that language is not neutral, that an educational system imposed on a people is politics, intended to produce certain results. Guji argues that the colonized people must liberate their languages by rejecting the language of the colonizer in order to preserve their local languages. The other scholar who has interrogated colonialism and language is Edward Said. Edward Said is a Palestinian scholar who fell out of favor with Yasser Arafat in 1993 because of Arafat signing the Oslo Accord. But that's a topic for another day. Today, we are interested in Edward Said and his position, imperialism and language. Said has written a book which is entitled Culture and Imperialism. And in this book, Said's thrust on language is that language of the imperialist colonizer is linked, directly and closely linked to the culture, power, and identity of the colonized. Language favors those that are in power. That language affects the structure of the culture of the colonized. That language compromises the identity of the colonized. Said goes further and says the imperialist language adopted by the colonized shapes the colonized's perception of the world and his character. It creates a perception of self-pity and an inferiority complex that the colonizer is superior to the colonized. That is the weapon. He calls it a powerful tool, to use Said's words. That language is a powerful tool in the hands of the colonizer against the colonized. And hence, the problem that we have in terms of national development in our country, Zambia, and in Africa at large. No country which has developed has used the language of another people. The Chinese have not done it that way. The Japanese have not done it that way. The breakdown of Yugoslavia in the Balkans into Serbia, Montenegro, Croatia was purely on account of each one of those separate countries preserving their language for development. What then is the way forward for Africa? Africa must reawaken and see the language bequeathed unto us by the colonizer as something that is not done in good faith. It was not done in good faith. It was intended to achieve an objective. And that objective was to continue to subdue and shape the perception of the colonized, to continue to be a project of colonialism beyond what we call independence today. That language is being used as chains in the minds of the colonized, who proclaim themselves to be independent today, physically, but still continue to be colonized mentally. Africa needs to walk away from the fear-mongering theory of the colonizer that the diversity of languages or dialects in African countries would be a foundation of conflict and not unity. The Cameroonians are fighting not because of one local language against another. They're fighting because the colonizer has continued to shape their thinking, that their identity is based on the colonizer's language. The second liberation of Africa, if not the third, after political liberation, economic liberation, the third liberation of Africa must be one about language. And this is a critical part because it is subtle. You can't see it. I remember during my time at school in the 70s, how we all clamored to sing the songs of musicians in the West. Jim Reeves, Jimmy Cliff, Dolly Parton, Ken Rogers. We hardly sang any Kalindula songs. We never sang any, or were taught to sing Imfunkutu songs. We never were taught to or allowed to practice Chingande or Kasilimu dances or songs. We identified and tried very hard to identify ourselves with the music of the West. Because music is language. The dances that we practice are language. They're a form of language. We communicate through dances. We communicate through music. But we found it an aspect of status, if not to look intelligent, that you could sing in English, that you could mimic and sing like Jimmy Cliff. There lies the challenge of the African leadership. The ones in the past have failed to do it. The present leadership looks reluctant to do it, but surely there must be those of us out there that think that it is high time that the language question is confronted. Kujua Thiongo is normal. Edward Said is normal. But let not their nationalism and patriotism in preserving the languages of Africa die with them. We owe them a duty to continue with their spirit. Because in our language lies our life. In our language lies the future of Africa and the future of Zambia. Let me end with one of my quotes, that culture and identity are two sides of the same coin. Save them both. If you have liked this video, please do subscribe and comment. You can also watch this episode on my YouTube channel, Winter M. Kabimba Insights. Thank you.